Hey there, friends. Well, after a month of getting headlines left and right saying that SNAP benefits were coming to an end, guess what? They're not going to come to an end. Real quick, guys, we just sent out a bunch of candles. I do have more candles. I know we ran out of stock for a short period of time. We also officially have our Christmas candles on the website. We're making those as long as it says ships by Thanksgiving, you will get it by Thanksgiving. We have a candle making system set up to get those out to you. So check out the candles on Yanasa Trading Co., as well as the Bison tallow, the Defend the Right to Farm hats, all the great stuff that Yanasa Trading Co. is selling. By shopping there, you are supporting this broadcast and making it possible for us to keep doing this. A judge ruled today that the Trump administration has to continue paying SNAP benefits. I don't think that there's going to be an appeal to this because the Trump administration wants to pay SNAP benefits. They haven't wanted these programs to shut down. What happened is back in 2018-19, when they paid benefits during a government shutdown, the Government Accountability Office came out and said that's a violation. You can't do that. And basically, this federal judge coming out and interpreting the law and the intent of the funds differently than the Government Accountability Office did, which they can do. The Government Accountability Office is not the law. A federal judge can make that decision. They basically said, no, you can, you should, and you will. So they're probably going to pay it out. They're most likely not going to appeal this decision. The Trump administration was already looking for ways that they could pay it out just differently. But here's the problem with this is that there's $5 billion in the contingency reserve, and SNAP benefits are over $9 billion a month. So, and this is interesting, a fun statistic here. Back in 2018-19, when this problem happened with COVID, there was about $3 billion in reserve, and the payout was $4.8 billion. So people didn't get their full SNAP benefits, but they definitely got by for a month because, I mean, it was pretty close. But now we have an even bigger gap between that $5 billion and that $9.8 billion. And I also think it's interesting that SNAP benefits, what we pay out, has doubled over that period of time. Part of that is the inflation of food, which we talk a lot about here on this channel. Part of that is also just showing you how many people have gone on to SNAP benefits under the last administration between now and then. It's rather fascinating. You know, this is the type of thing that COVID did to our society, put that many more people on SNAP. So people are going to get SNAP, but they're not going to get their full benefits, and they're most likely not going to get their benefits on time, except for where there's states that may have issued an emergency declaration. I'm guessing that those states will be able to work directly with the USDA in resolving those issues, and they probably have already put measures in place to start getting those benefits out there. So I think it all comes down to your state, whether or not they have the funds to go ahead and pay it instead of waiting on the USDA to pay it. But it all sounds positive, except for our government is still shut down. Nothing else has changed in that realm. So we have more and more federal workers every single day going on furlough. That's more and more people every single day not getting a paycheck. There are people out there already who have not gotten a paycheck for a month. There are people who are just now entering this phase. It just depends on how the budgets work out and at what time each agency has run out of funds to pay their workers or pay our soldiers. These are people who serve our country. You know, I don't agree with every agency that we have. Believe me, I don't. But these are people who serve our country, and they deserve to be treated a little better than that. But what I think is interesting about all this is it does come down, I mean, public broadcasting has been a touching point. They want to make sure that the government is paying for propaganda to all of you, because these news agencies that rely on that, NPR, PBS, believe it or not, PBS documentaries are very often skewed. You know, history is only as good as the person who wrote it or the person telling the story. So they want that funding in there because they need that propaganda. Every country in the world has propaganda paid for by the government. But the big thing about all this is the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Some of you may know this as Obamacare. But here's the thing about ACA, is it was established to actually lower the cost of healthcare, but it didn't do that. Healthcare actually went up tremendously. Look at prescription drug spending just for an example, but before ACA in 2009, it was around $249 billion. It's more than doubled that since ACA. And a lot of that is because ACA opened up the door for more people to get medications, for doctors to write more prescriptions to people. But it also, if you believe it or not, it consolidated the industry and gave complete control to the pharmaceutical companies. If you look at a lot of independent and private practices around the country, they were all bought up by bigger hospitals. And you had this massive consolidation, which in turn made it harder for people in rural areas to get health care. They have to drive longer distances to get it because everything has been bought up around them. And it created this massive consolidation. Then you have these doctors that are trained to basically just treat everything with pharmaceuticals. And so, you know, it's no secret that when the ACA was passed, pharmaceutical companies invested $80 billion into quote unquote discounting pharmaceuticals. That $80 billion investment has returned to them more than fivefold. It was a brilliant investment for pharmaceutical companies because they're getting all that money back. You go from $249 billion a year, and these are retail sales. These aren't including hospitals and everything else. This is just retail sales. If you get into hospitals, it's getting close to $1 trillion a year, okay? So double. You see a doubling in the pharmaceutical industry of sales. And the industry, on top of that, like I said, it consolidated. So did the pharmaceutical industry. Just three pharmaceutical giants supply 80% of those prescriptions today. So you had this massive growth in sales from ACA. You had this massive consolidation in healthcare providers, in insurance providers. You don't really have much of a choice in insurance anymore. And then on top of that, the people at the top of this pedestal also consolidated to three, mega brands that are making all these pharmaceuticals. And so all this money is being pumped up to those groups. And what's funny about this is we look at this government shutdown and we wonder, okay, why would they put 42 million Americans in a position in the first place where they could starve? Who would do that? Who would make people come to work every day but not pay them? I mean, that just sounds so horrible to a lot of us. It does, doesn't it? Well, the people that are doing this are the people who are trying to push an extension on this ACA bill, which has not worked. Like I said, it consolidated the industry, it consolidated the power into the pharmaceutical companies who invested $80 billion to help make this happen, and hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying during the process of creating Obamacare. But that's where I think if you follow the money trail, you'll find where a lot of this stuff lies. Chuck Schumer has gotten $1.5 million from pharmaceutical lobbyists, I think like over $500,000 just in the last election cycle. The Democratic Party in the last election cycle as a whole has received about $40 million, more than double anything that they've given to any other party. So not only is it critical for the pharmaceutical companies to maintain ACA so that they continue to get basically government funded. A lot of these sales are government funded. They're funded by taxpayer dollars. We're making these people rich as all get out. So they have to keep ACA around. And all of the politicians that rely on them for funding need to keep them around. And to them, this is more important than our health, than our food, than anything else. Because here's the thing. Number one, we're seeing more and more people become addicted to prescription drugs in this country. And we're seeing an alarming situation from that. I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but you know what I mean. Number two, the cost of healthcare in all has nearly doubled since ACA. What you used to pay, I remember before ACA, and this is from a guy, I guess this was like 12 years ago, I probably paid $80 a month for my health insurance plan. That was what I paid per month, was about $80 per month. After ACA passed, I was a young, healthy guy. Suddenly my premium doubled overnight. And I realized it went down for a lot of people. It made healthcare available to a lot of people. But for me, it doubled overnight. Okay, so it wasn't beneficial to everybody from the get-go. Now, heck, health insurance is at least 4 or 5 times higher than that per month than it was back then. And a lot of that has to do with industry consolidation. You also have all of these people who are pushing rebates on all your medicines and things, and there's a big, massive scam behind that as well. But then we have to sit back and we have to wonder, okay? We have, since 2019, doubled the amount of SNAP benefits from $4.8 billion to over $9 billion. People can't afford to buy groceries because they're paying so much in healthcare. The ACA program didn't work. It never did work. And instead of, arguing this and tying it to a bill and trying to get something that has failed to continue, what they really need to do is drop the whole thing. They need to rewrite the entire thing. It was a bad idea from the beginning, and they need to do it without the input of the big pharma companies, because they're the ones that are controlling this entire picture. In my perspective, we are being held hostage as Americans over money going to big pharma. That's what this all comes down to, and that money flow going back into politicians' pockets to keep them in the state of power that we have given them, which is tremendous. Think about it. Three corporations control just the retail side is $500 billion. Just the retail sales is $500 billion a year. Does that not make any of you angry? Like, this is what has become of the ACA program. We were promised, folks, affordable health care. But what we got was a healthcare monopoly wrapped up in a red bow and a heck of a lot of red tape. And now, while millions of Americans face starvation, granted, a lot of them are going to get some of their SNAP payments, and millions of Americans aren't getting a paycheck, these rich profiteers are sitting back in complete comfort watching the show, trying to get what they want, trying to win again. They want to get another one over on us. So I'd like to ask the question, call me crazy, but is America not being held hostage by one of the most powerful industries in the world? Is all of this really about keeping people healthy, or is it about keeping shareholder profits where they want them? I hope you guys look into some of this stuff, because it is fascinating. When you start running through the money trail, you start looking at the donations that some of these people who are trying to tack this thing onto a clean bill, has nothing to do with it. They're trying to push it through without a discussion. They don't want to discuss it with our elected officials. We put new people in office all across the United States. There are new elected officials in there. This is something that I think has to be worked out. I don't think it's one of those things that they can push under the rug. If you just cancel it all together, insurance premiums are going to go through the roof. But if you keep the status quo, it's going to fail. It already is failing. The only thing the status quo does is benefit extremely wealthy pharmaceutical companies and their shareholders. So in my perspective, what they need to do is get the government back open and then sit in the chamber through Christmas and figure out what to do with the ACA. Come up with a new plan. Come up with something that restores confidence in the system, that restores choice in the system, that breaks up these monopolistic companies that have taken over basically our entire government at this point. They've got the whole thing shut down.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com.